Silver Ridge burned on a moonless night, while Senator Harold Cromwell watched from his mansion on the hill. The flames danced across power lines he'd been paid to ignore, destroying 400 homes in 6 hours. When morning came, he smiled. Everything was going according to plan. They called it a tragedy. He called it an opportunity. While families searched the ashes for fragments of their lives, his machine was already moving. Insurance claims denied. Safety reports buried. Shell companies preparing to feast on the remains of American dreams. But Cromwell forgot the first rule of playing with fire. Sometimes you get burned. When Judge Nathaniel Carter took the case, the senator dismissed him as just another bureaucrat to be bought or broken. After all, what could one judge do against an empire built on decades of corruption? He should have looked closer. Should have. Asked why they called Carter the Flame in legal circles. Should have wondered why corrupt politicians went pale at the mention of his name. Because while Cromwell had spent years learning how to profit from fires, Carter had mastered something far more dangerous: how to start them. Now, as the senator swaggers into courtroom 3, he's about to learn that some flames can't be controlled, and that true justice, like fire, doesn't care how powerful you think you are. It burns everyone the same. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. In the small town of Silver Ridge, ash drifted like gray snow through the morning air. The acrid smell of smoke still clung to everything, a constant reminder of the devastation that had swept through just days before. Sarah Mitchell stood in what used to be her living room, though you'd never know it now. The walls were gone, leaving only blackened wooden beams reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Her boots crunched on something, probably the remains of her grandmother's china cabinet. She couldn't bring herself to look down and confirm. "Mom?" Tommy, her 10-year-old son, picked his way carefully through the rubble. "I found Rocket." He held up a soot-covered stuffed astronaut, its once white fabric now permanently stained gray. Sarah forced a smile, grateful that at least one precious thing had survived. All around them, similar scenes played out across the neighborhood. The Hendersons next door were sifting through the remains of their home with garden tools, hoping to salvage family photos. Down the street, old Mr. Patterson sat in a folding chair, staring at the foundation where his house of 40 years had stood. The fire had been indiscriminate in its destruction, leaving some homes partially standing while others were reduced to nothing but ash and concrete. The morning news crew from Channel 5 had set up their equipment at the end of the street. Their presence had become as constant as the lingering smoke over the past few days. The reporter, a young woman with perfectly styled hair that seemed out of place among the destruction, stood before the camera with practiced solemnity. "We're here in Silver Ridge, where residents continue to grapple with the aftermath of what many are calling a preventable tragedy," she said into her microphone. "Behind me, you can see the devastation caused by last week's wildfires, but the question on everyone's mind isn't about the fires themselves. It's about why nothing was done to prevent them." The camera panned to show footage from a press conference. Senator Harold Cromwell stood at a podium, his silver hair immaculate and his tailored suit crisp. Despite the gravity of the situation, a slight smirk played at the corners of his mouth as he addressed the reporters. "These natural disasters are tragic, of course," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. "But hindsight is always 20/20. No one could have predicted the extent of these fires." The footage cut to another clip, this one from 6 months earlier. A worried-looking engineer from the power company stood before the State Energy Commission. "The power lines in the Silver Ridge area are dangerously outdated," he warned. "Without immediate upgrades, we're looking at a significant fire risk." Sarah turned away from the TV news van, her hands clenching into fists. She, like everyone else in Silver Ridge, had seen the leaked emails showing Senator Cromwell had received substantial donations from the Energy Corporation just days after, blocking legislation that would have required safety upgrades to the power grid. Inside the Silver Ridge County Courthouse, a different kind of storm was brewing. Judge Nathaniel Carter sat on the bench, his dignified presence commanding attention in courtroom 3. At 53, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his position through decades of unwavering dedication to justice. His dark eyes missed nothing as he presided over a routine property dispute. "Your Honor," the plaintiff's lawyer was saying, "my client simply wants—" A commotion outside the courtroom interrupted the proceedings. The sound of angry voices and footsteps grew louder, and Judge Carter could make out chants of "Justice for Silver Ridge" through the heavy wooden doors. "We'll take a 15-minute recess," he announced, his deep voice brooking no argument. As the bailiff cleared the courtroom, Carter remained seated, reviewing the documents that had just been delivered to his desk. His expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he read. The higher court had assigned him to oversee the class action lawsuit against Senator Cromwell and the Energy Corporation. It was the kind of case that could make or break a judge's career, and change countless lives in the process. Carter knew the stakes all too well. He'd grown up watching his own father fight against powerful men who thought themselves above the law. Now, decades later, he found himself in a position to hold such men accountable. The protesters outside grew louder. Through his chamber windows, Carter could see them gathering on the courthouse steps. They carried signs reading, "Cromwell killed our homes and corporate greed taught our community need." Among them, he spotted familiar faces. The local baker whose shop had burned, the high school teacher who'd lost everything, the elderly couple who'd lived in Silver Ridge their entire lives. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the courthouse, and the crowd's anger intensified. Senator Harold Cromwell emerged, surrounded by a team of expensive lawyers in tailored suits. They formed a protective barrier around him as he ascended the courthouse steps, but they couldn't shield him from the voices of his constituents. "My children are sleeping in a shelter because of you," a woman shouted. Cromwell's smirk never wavered. He straightened his red silk tie and whispered something to one of his lawyers, causing several of them to chuckle. The display of arrogance sent a fresh wave of anger through the crowd. Inside his chambers, Judge Carter watched the scene unfold. He'd seen men like Cromwell before, men who confused wealth with worth, who believed their political connections made them untouchable. They all shared the same fatal flaw. They underestimated those they viewed as beneath them. A knock at his chamber door interrupted his thoughts. His clerk entered with more documents, preliminary motions from both sides. As Carter reviewed them, a news alert flashed on his phone. He tapped it, and video began to play. Gregory Walsh, Cromwell's lead attorney, stood before a crowd of reporters outside his downtown law office. "While we respect the judicial system," Walsh was saying, "we have concerns about the appointment of Judge Carter to this case. In today's climate, there's obviously pressure to make certain demographic considerations in these appointments. We simply want to ensure that merit remains the primary qualification for such important proceedings." The implications behind Walsh's carefully chosen words were clear. Judge Carter closed the video and set down his phone, his expression unchanging. He'd faced such thinly veiled racism throughout his career, but he'd never let it deter him from his duty. In the courthouse parking lot, local journalist Anna Morales was preparing for her evening broadcast. At 32, she'd made a name for herself through dogged investigative reporting and an unwavering commitment to the truth. Her cameraman adjusted the lighting as she reviewed her notes one final time. "The stakes in this case couldn't be higher," she began, looking directly into the camera. "For the residents of Silver Ridge, this isn't just about property damage or insurance claims. This is about justice. If Senator Cromwell and the Energy Corporation aren't held accountable, hundreds of families will remain homeless while those responsible continue to profit from their negligence." The camera panned to show the courthouse behind her, its stone facade glowing in the late afternoon light. "Sources tell us that Judge Nathaniel Carter will be presiding over the case. Judge Carter is known for his strict adherence to the law and his immunity to political pressure. But with Senator Cromwell's powerful allies already attempting to undermine the judge's credibility, the question remains, will justice prevail, or will Silver Ridge's tragedy go unpunished?" As the sun began to set, Sarah Mitchell and her son Tommy walked through the temporary housing area that had been set up at the high school gymnasium. Cots lined the walls, each one representing a family displaced by the fires. The air was thick with the smell of donated coffee and the sound of children trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in their upended lives. "Mom?" Tommy's voice was small in the cavernous space. "When can we go home?" Sarah pulled him close, fighting back tears. "I don't know, sweetie, but Judge Carter is going to hear our case. Remember Mrs. Peterson from church? She says he's a good judge, a fair judge. He'll help make things right." Across town, Judge Carter sat alone in his chambers, reviewing case files long after his staff had gone home. The weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on his shoulders. On his desk, photos of Silver Ridge's destruction were spread out beside financial records showing the energy corporation's profits and Cromwell's campaign donations. The connection was clear, but proving it in court would be another matter entirely. A message flashed on his computer screen. Another motion from Cromwell's team, this one questioning Carter's objectivity. The judge allowed himself a small smile. If they thought they could intimidate him with legal paperwork and veiled threats, they clearly didn't know him at all. He'd spent his entire career preparing for a case like this. The night settled over Silver Ridge, but sleep was elusive for many of its residents. In the gymnasium, families tossed and turned on their cots, haunted by memories of what they'd lost. In his mansion across town, Senator Cromwell hosted his legal team for a strategy session, their laughter drifting out over manicured lawns. And in his modest home, Judge Carter sat at his kitchen table, drinking coffee and preparing for the battle ahead. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The people of Silver Ridge would finally have their day in court, and Judge Nathaniel Carter would ensure that justice was served, regardless of the cost to his career or the threats to his reputation. The system that Senator Cromwell had manipulated for so long was about to show its teeth, and not even his expensive lawyers could protect him from the truth. As midnight approached, a cool breeze finally cleared some of the smoke from the air over Silver Ridge. In the ruins of what had once been a thriving community, a child's bicycle lay on its side, its once bright paint now dulled by ash. It stood as a silent testament to all that had been lost, and to all that was at stake in the coming legal battle. The town held its breath, waiting for justice. Tomorrow would bring Judge Carter's first ruling in the case, and with it, the first test of whether the powerful could truly be held accountable for their actions. The stage was set for a battle that would change not just Silver Ridge, but the very nature of justice in a system too often swayed by money and influence. In the gymnasium, Tommy Mitchell clutched his rescued astronaut toy and finally drifted off to sleep. His mother Sarah remained awake, staring at the ceiling and whispering a prayer, not for herself, but for Judge Carter. She, like everyone else in Silver Ridge, knew that their hopes for justice rested on his shoulders. The question that hung in the air was whether those shoulders would prove strong enough to bear the weight of an entire town's future. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the lingering haze over Silver Ridge as Sarah Mitchell took her place on the witness stand. Gone was her usual gardening attire, replaced by her one surviving church dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, but her voice remained steady as she began to tell her story. Judge Nathaniel. Carter leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes focused intently on the witness. The preliminary hearings had begun, and the weight of Silver Ridge's tragedy was about to be laid bare in his courtroom. "We'd just finished dinner," Sarah began, her words cutting through the hushed courtroom. "Tommy was doing his homework at the kitchen table. That's when we smelled the smoke." She paused, swallowing hard. The power lines had been sparking all summer. We'd called the company so many times, but they always said the same thing: no budget for repairs. Across the courtroom, Senator Harold Cromwell sat with his legal team, his expression carefully neutral. His lead attorney, Gregory Walsh, scribbled notes while maintaining an air of practiced disinterest. "The fire moved so fast," Sarah continued, her voice cracking. "We barely had time to grab Tommy's medication and a few photos. Everything else," she gestured helplessly. 23 years of memories, gone in minutes. More witnesses followed, each story more heartbreaking than the last. Old Mr. Patterson described watching his wife's handmade quilts burn. Irreplaceable. Pieces of their life together reduced to ash. The high school basketball coach spoke of his team's trophies melting in the display case. A young father broke down as he recalled carrying his sleeping toddler through thick smoke, knowing his late wife's wedding dress was burning in their bedroom closet. Gregory Walsh stood, straightening his expensive tie. While these stories are undoubtedly moving, Your Honor, they remain merely anecdotal. The defense maintains that these fires were an act of nature, impossible to predict or prevent. Judge Carter's expression remained neutral, but his pen pressed slightly harder against his notepad. The court acknowledges your objection, Mr. Walsh. Please proceed with your next witness. The defense called Dr. James Wilson, a meteorologist paid handsomely by Cromwell's team. The conditions that day were unprecedented, he testified, his academic tone lending an air of authority. High winds, low humidity, extreme temperatures, a perfect storm, if you will. From his bench, Judge Carter observed the subtle shifts in the witness's body language, noting each carefully rehearsed response. His years on the bench had taught him to read between the lines, to see the carefully constructed narrative being built. During a brief recess, Anna Morales cornered Dr. Wilson in the courthouse hallway. Doctor, would you care to comment on your previous statements about climate change contributing to fire risks? The ones you made before Senator Cromwell's team hired you? The meteorologist's face reddened. No comment, he muttered, hurrying away. Back in session, the defense continued their strategy of deflection. Natural disasters are tragic but unavoidable, Walsh argued, pacing before the jury. No amount of infrastructure improvement could have prevented this outcome. Judge Carter's pen moved steadily across his notepad, documenting each inconsistency in the defense's arguments. He noticed how they carefully avoided mentioning the numerous maintenance requests, the ignored safety reports, the diverted funds. During the afternoon session, Jennifer Taylor, a former power line inspector, took the stand. I submitted 17 reports about the condition of those lines, she testified, her voice tight with suppressed anger. 17 detailed assessments warning of imminent failure. Each one was marked reviewed and filed away. Walsh stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about internal corporate procedures. Overruled, Carter replied, his deep voice carrying authority without raising its volume. The witness may continue. As Jennifer detailed the deteriorating conditions she documented, Cromwell shifted in his seat. For the first time, a crack appeared in his confident facade. His fingers drummed silently on the table, a nervous tell that didn't escape Judge Carter's notice. The day's proceedings were interrupted by commotion outside. Insurance company representatives had arrived, surrounded by their own legal teams. They filed into the courtroom, taking seats behind Cromwell's team. The message was clear. They stood united against the victims. Mark Reynolds, lead counsel for Evergreen Insurance, approached the bench. Your Honor, we're filing a motion to intervene. Our contracts clearly state that acts of God are not covered under existing policies. Judge Carter reviewed the motion, his expression unchanging. The court will review your request, Mr. Reynolds. For now, you may observe. During the afternoon break, Carter retreated to his chambers, loosening his tie slightly as he reviewed his notes. The insurance company's intervention complicated matters, but it also revealed the broader conspiracy at play. His years practicing law had taught him to look for patterns, and this one was becoming clearer by the hour. A knock at his door preceded his clerk entering with more files. Sir, Senator Cromwell's team has submitted another motion questioning your appointment to the case. Carter nodded, accepting the papers without comment. He'd expected this, a systematic attempt to undermine his authority through procedural challenges. Let them try. He'd faced worse throughout his career. The afternoon session began with Michael Brooks, an insurance claims adjuster, on the stand. Our policy is clear, he testified. Natural disasters fall under the Act of God clause. And who determines what constitutes an act of God? The plaintiff's lawyer asked. Well, our experts. The same experts who consult for the Energy Corporation? Objection. Walsh stood so quickly his chair scraped across the floor. Sustained, Carter ruled, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Another connection noted, another thread in the web of corruption. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the courthouse windows, Sarah Mitchell returned to the stand for redirect examination. She'd changed from her church dress into work clothes, having come straight from her shift at the diner where she now worked double shifts to afford the motel room she shared with Tommy. "Mrs. Mitchell," the plaintiff's lawyer began, "could you tell us about the power surges you experienced before the fire?" "They happened almost daily," she replied. "Our appliances would buzz, lights would flicker. We called the power company. So many times we memorized their hold music. In the gallery, other residents nodded in recognition. They'd all lived the same nightmare, all been ignored by the same system." As Sarah stepped down, she passed Cromwell's table. The senator remained seated, breaking courtroom protocol once again. Judge Carter noticed but held his response. The time would come. That evening, Carter sat in his study at home, surrounding himself with case law and precedents. His wife, Marie, brought him coffee and a gentle reminder to eat something. "Nathan, you're carrying the weight of the whole town." "Someone has to," he replied softly, squeezing her hand. The next morning brought the insurance company's parade of experts, each testifying that the fires were unforeseeable and unavoidable. Carter listened, noting how their testimonies aligned suspiciously well with both Cromwell's defense and their own refusal to pay claims. During cross-examination, the plaintiff's lawyer produced maintenance records showing systematic neglect of the power infrastructure. The defense objected repeatedly, but Carter allowed the evidence. Each objection only highlighted their desperation to hide the truth. The day's testimony concluded with Rebecca Chen, a climate scientist. "While climate conditions contributed to fire risk," she explained, "proper infrastructure maintenance would have significantly reduced the danger." The power line's failure was not just predictable, it was predicted. As she spoke, Carter noticed Cromwell leaning forward to whisper something to Walsh. The senator's smirk had returned, but it seemed forced now, a mask hiding growing concern. That evening, local news stations broadcast footage of the day's proceedings. Ana Morales' report cut through the corporate spin. As testimony continues, a pattern emerges. Years of warnings ignored, safety measures blocked, profits prioritized over people's lives. In the gymnasium-turned-shelter, families gathered around a small TV, watching their stories being told. Tommy Mitchell clutched his rescued astronaut toy, listening as his mother's testimony was replayed. "You were brave, Mom," he whispered. The next morning, Carter arrived early to find Cromwell waiting in the courthouse parking lot. The senator straightened his Italian silk tie, attempting to project authority. "Judge Carter," he called out, his tone falsely jovial. "I thought we might have a word." Carter walked past him without breaking stride. "Any communication should go through proper channels, Senator. I'm sure your lawyers can advise you on the procedure." Inside his chambers, Carter reviewed the day's schedule. The insurance companies would present their final expert witnesses, followed by more testimony from residents. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a conspiracy of negligence and greed. As the session began, Carter surveyed his courtroom. The gallery was packed with Silver Ridge residents, their faces bearing the strain of displaced lives and shattered dreams. They sat quietly, disciplined, knowing their dignity in the face of loss spoke louder than any outburst. Walsh called their final expert, an economist who argued that upgrading the power lines would have been financially unfeasible. Carter watched the jury's reactions, noting their skepticism. The questions of cost seemed hollow against the human suffering they'd witnessed. During the lunch recess, Carter overheard two jurors discussing the case in the courthouse cafeteria. He immediately called both legal teams to his chambers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm declaring a 1-hour recess. When we resume, I'll issue instructions to the jury about proper conduct. Let's ensure this trial proceeds without any procedural issues that might affect its outcome." The warning was clear. He wouldn't allow any technicalities to derail justice. The afternoon brought Robert Martinez to the stand, a former employee of the Energy Corporation. "We had the budget for upgrades," he revealed. But after Senator Cromwell's office intervened, those funds were redirected to shareholder dividends. Walsh's objection was immediate and forceful. Carter allowed the testimony, watching as Cromwell's facade of confidence cracked further. As the day drew to a close, Carter retired to his chambers to review his notes. The pattern was clear, a network of corruption and negligence that had turned natural risk into inevitable disaster. But proving it within the constraints of the law would require more than just truth. It would require careful navigation of the system Cromwell had spent years manipulating. That night, as Carter drove home, he passed through the burned sections of Silver Ridge. The devastation was still raw, the scars still fresh. In the distance, he could see the temporary shelter's lights glowing against the darkening sky, a beacon of both tragedy and resilience. The next day would bring more testimony, more evidence, more attempts by Cromwell's team to obscure the truth. But with each passing hour, the true story of Silver Ridge's tragedy emerged more clearly. The question wasn't whether there was corruption, it was whether justice could prevail against those who believed themselves above the law. In his kitchen that night, Carter sat with his case notes spread before him. Marie placed a hand on his shoulder, understanding his silence. The weight of Silver Ridge's future rested on his shoulders, and he felt every ounce of that responsibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to undermine the process. But Judge Nathaniel Carter had spent his life preparing for cases like this, where justice hung in the balance between power and truth. He was ready for whatever came next, knowing that the people of Silver Ridge were counting on him to ensure their voices were heard. As midnight approached, the town slept uneasily, waiting for justice. In the shelter, Sarah Mitchell finally dozed off, her son Tommy curled against her side. In his mansion, Cromwell paced, his confidence eroding with each passing day. And in his modest home, Judge Carter prepared for another day of ensuring that the law served those it was meant to protect, not those who sought to manipulate it. The battle for justice was far from over, but the truth was emerging, one testimony at a time. Silver Ridge's day of reckoning approached, and not even Senator Cromwell's wealth and influence could stop it. The only question was, how many more lives would be affected before justice finally prevailed? The morning's tension in courtroom 3 could be cut with a knife. Senator Harold Cromwell had just entered, 15 minutes late, scrolling through his phone with deliberate casualness. Judge Nathaniel Carter watched him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The packed gallery fell silent, sensing the coming storm. "Senator Cromwell," Carter's deep voice carried effortlessly through the courtroom. "In this courtroom, we observe certain protocols. One of them is standing when the judge enters. Another is arriving on time. Consider this your only warning." Cromwell's head snapped up, eyes narrowing at the public rebuke. He opened his mouth to respond, but Gregory Walsh quickly placed a restraining hand on his arm. The senator slowly rose, his face flushed with anger. "Thank you," Carter said evenly. "Now, let's proceed with today's testimony." In the gallery, Ana Morales scribbled furiously in her notebook. The exchange hadn't just been about courtroom protocol. It was the first direct confrontation between the powerful senator and the judge he'd been subtly undermining for weeks. The morning's first witness was a former Energy Corporation accountant, detailing the company's creative bookkeeping around infrastructure maintenance. As he testified, Anna noticed movement at the courtroom's back entrance. A man in a dark suit slipped inside, passing a note to Judge Carter's clerk. Carter read the note, his expression unchanging. "We'll take a 15-minute recess," he announced. "Ms. Morales, please approach the bench." In his chambers, Carter handed Anna the note. "You've been looking into Cromwell's finances?" "Yes, Your Honor." She pulled out her notebook. "After the fires, his net worth increased significantly. I've traced several large deposits to offshore accounts, but I need more time to verify the sources." Carter nodded thoughtfully. "Be careful, Ms. Morales. People who profit from tragedy rarely appreciate having their methods exposed." Back in the courtroom, Walsh was cross-examining the accountant, trying to discredit his testimony. Isn't it true that you were passed over for promotion 3 times? Objection, relevance, the plaintiff's lawyer called out. Sustained, Carter ruled. Mr. Walsh, stick to the financial evidence. During the lunch recess, Carter's clerk delivered another note. This one marked urgent confidential. Inside was a simple message. Not everyone took bribes. Some of us have conscience. Check the maintenance budget transfers from June 15th. Carter secured the note in his desk drawer, his mind racing. An inside source at Cromwell's office? The timing was crucial. June 15th was just days before the senator had publicly opposed the infrastructure safety bill. The afternoon session began with more victim testimony. Emily Watson, a local teacher, described evacuating her first-grade class as the flames approached the school. The children were so scared, she recalled, wiping away tears. We could see the power lines sparking overhead as we loaded them onto buses. Cromwell shifted restlessly in his seat, checking his watch every few minutes. His usual smirk had been replaced by an impatient scowl. When Carter called another brief recess, the senator stormed out, phone pressed to his ear. Anna Morales followed at a discreet distance, her reporter's instincts on high alert. She couldn't hear Cromwell's conversation, but his agitated gestures told their own story. Something had rattled him. Back in session, Walsh called a surprise witness, Dr. Elizabeth Fuller, a policy expert who had consulted on the infrastructure safety bill. In your professional opinion, Walsh asked, would the proposed upgrades have prevented these fires? Given the extreme weather conditions, she began, but Carter interrupted. Dr. Fuller, please remind the court of your current employment. She hesitated. I work for the Heritage Policy Institute. And who funds that institute? Walsh jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. The witness's employment is not relevant. Overruled, Carter said firmly. The jury has a right to know about potential conflicts of interest. Please answer the question, Dr. Fuller. The Heritage Policy Institute receives funding from several sources, she admitted reluctantly, including Energy Solutions Corporation and Senator Cromwell's Political Action Committee. A murmur ran through the gallery. Carter allowed it to continue for a moment before calling for order. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the most effective way to expose corruption was to let people connect the dots themselves. That evening, as Carter reviewed the day's transcripts in his chambers, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage, level 3, 30 minutes, come alone. Information about June 15th. Carter considered the risks. It could be a trap, but his instincts told him otherwise. He called his security detail, instructing them to maintain discreet surveillance of the garage. The parking garage was nearly empty when Carter arrived. A figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar. A young man in a rumpled suit, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Judge Carter, I worked in Cromwell's office, the June 15th transfers. They weren't just about maintenance budgets. There were other payments, lots of them. Insurance companies, safety inspectors, local officials. Do you have proof? Carter asked quietly. The man pulled out a USB drive. Everything's here, but I can't testify. They'll know it was me. I understand, Carter assured him. The court can protect your identity. The whistleblower shook his head. You don't know these people, what they're capable of. Just use the information. But leave me out of it. Before Carter could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps sent the young man running into the darkness. Carter pocketed the USB drive, his mind already working through the legal implications of anonymously sourced evidence. The next morning, state officials began appearing in Carter's courtroom. They sat quietly in the gallery, their presence a silent reminder of the political pressure surrounding the case. Your Honor, Walsh began smoothly. Given recent developments, we believe it would be appropriate for you to recuse yourself from this case. On what grounds, Mr. Walsh? There are concerns about potential bias, the political climate being what it is. Mr. Walsh, Carter interrupted, his voice steel wrapped in silk. Are you suggesting that justice should bend to political climate? The gallery fell silent, waiting for Walsh's response. The attorney tugged at his collar. "Of course not, Your Honor. But then we'll proceed with the evidence, political climate notwithstanding." Outside the courthouse, protesters had gathered again. Their signs now included messages of support for Judge Carter alongside their calls for justice. Sarah Mitchell stood among them, Tommy at her side, holding a sign that read, "Truth can't be bought." Anna Morales worked her way through the crowd, gathering quotes for her latest story. Her investigation into Cromwell's finances had hit several dead ends, but the USB drive's contents might change everything, if they could be verified and admitted into evidence. Back in the courtroom, Walsh called another expert witness, but Carter's attention was drawn to Cromwell's behavior. The senator was unusually agitated, constantly whispering to his lawyers and sending rapid-fire texts. Something had him spooked. During the afternoon recess, Carter received another anonymous message. "They're cleaning house. Shredders running overtime in Cromwell's office. More coming soon." Carter shared this information with the plaintiff's legal team, knowing they'd need to move quickly to preserve any remaining evidence. The corruption was vast, but like all such networks, it would crumble once enough supporting pieces were removed. The day's final witness was a former safety inspector who had approved the power lines just months before the fire. Under cross-examination, he began to crack. "Yes, I signed off on them," he admitted. "But you have to understand the pressure from above." Objection. Walsh was on his feet instantly. "Overruled," Carter said firmly. "Please continue, Mr. Parker. They made it clear. Either sign off or find another job, with a family to support." In the gallery, Sarah Mitchell watched the inspector break down. She understood the choice he'd faced, the same impossible choices so many working people confronted when powerful men made demands. That evening, as Carter prepared to leave his chambers, his clerk rushed in with breaking news. The whistleblower's USB drive had already made an impact. 2 insurance company executives had resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons. The next morning, Cromwell arrived early for once, huddled with his legal team. The swagger was gone from his bearing, replaced by barely contained panic. When Carter entered, the senator stood immediately, his face a mask of forced politeness. The day's proceedings began with a bombshell. The plaintiff's team moved to enter new evidence, including documents from the USB drive showing the complex web of payoffs and corruption surrounding the infrastructure decisions. Walsh objected strenuously, questioning the evidence's provenance and admissibility. Carter listened patiently to both sides before making his ruling. The court finds that while the source of these documents must remain confidential to protect the whistleblower, their authenticity can be verified through other means. The evidence is admitted. Cromwell's face turned purple with rage. He grabbed Walsh's arm, whispering furiously, but the attorney shook his head. They both knew what this meant. The carefully constructed wall of deniability was crumbling. Anna Morales sat in the gallery, live tweeting the proceedings. Her followers had grown exponentially as the case gained national attention. The story of Silver Ridge was becoming a symbol of the fight against corporate greed and political corruption. During the lunch break, Carter received another warning from his anonymous source. "Watch your back. They're desperate now. More evidence coming, but be careful." The afternoon session brought testimony from a forensic accountant who began connecting the dots between Cromwell's finances, the insurance companies, and the delayed infrastructure repairs. With each revelation, the senator's composure cracked. Further, outside the courthouse, the crowd of supporters had grown. They cheered as Carter left that evening, but he took no pleasure in their adulation. He knew the real fight was just beginning. Desperate men with power were the most dangerous. That night, Carter worked late in his chambers, reviewing the new evidence. The web of corruption was vast, touching every level of government and business. But at its center sat Senator Harold Cromwell, directing money and influence like a conductor leading a corrupt orchestra. As he prepared to leave, Carter noticed a small envelope that had been slipped under his door. Inside was a single photograph, his wife Marie leaving her office, clearly taken earlier that day. The message was clear. They knew where to find his family. Carter's hands shook slightly as he pulled out his phone to call Marie. She answered on the first ring, safe at home. He didn't mention the photo, but he did accept the security detail he'd been refusing. The next morning, Carter entered his courtroom with renewed determination. If they thought threats would deter him, they didn't understand what drove him. This wasn't just about one case or one town. It was about the fundamental principle that justice should serve everyone, not just the powerful. As the session began, Walsh seemed unusually confident. He called a surprise witness, someone claiming to have evidence that Carter had conflicts of interest in the case. But the judge had been expecting this. Before your witness takes the stand, Mr. Walsh, the court would like to address certain matters. Carter's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. Attempting to intimidate a federal judge is a serious crime. So is threatening their family. The color drained from Walsh's face. Cromwell started to stand, but his lawyer yanked him back down. This court will not be swayed by threats, innuendo, or political pressure. Carter continued. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads. If anyone has a problem with that, I suggest they take it up with the federal authorities who are now investigating attempts to obstruct justice in this case. The gallery erupted in applause, which Carter quickly gavelled down. But the message had been sent. The days of operating in the shadows were over. The fight for justice in Silver Ridge had entered a new phase, and Judge Nathaniel Carter was ready for whatever came next. As the sun set over the courthouse, Sarah Mitchell watched her son Tommy playing with other children whose families had been displaced by the fire. Despite everything they had lost, hope was finally beginning to return to their community. In Judge Carter, they'd found someone willing to stand up to the powerful, to demand accountability. The battle was far from over, but the truth was emerging, one piece of evidence at a time. And in courtroom 3, Judge Carter prepared for another day of ensuring that justice would prevail, no matter the cost. The courthouse security guard found it first, a wallet lying in the empty parking garage, belonging to Michael Foster, the whistleblower who had provided Judge Carter with crucial evidence against Senator Cromwell. No signs of struggle, no blood, just an abandoned wallet and a lingering question. Where was Foster? Judge Nathaniel Carter studied the security footage in his chambers, watching as Foster entered the parking garage the previous evening. The young man had been scheduled to meet with federal investigators, ready to formally document his allegations against Cromwell. He never made it to that meeting. The FBI is treating it as a potential kidnapping, Detective Sandra Williams informed Carter, her expression grim. Given the timing and circumstances, we have to assume it's connected to the case. Carter nodded, his jaw tight. Any leads? Security cameras in the area mysteriously malfunctioned around the time of his disappearance. Someone knew what they were doing. Anna Morales was already outside the courthouse when Carter arrived that morning, her press badge catching the early Sienna sunlight. Judge Carter, any comment on Michael Foster's disappearance? No comment on ongoing investigations, he replied, but paused briefly. Ms. Morales, be careful with this story. Some people will go to great lengths to keep the truth buried. Inside courtroom 3, Gregory Walsh approached the bench before proceedings began. Your Honor, given recent developments, we request a continuance to review new evidence. Motion denied, Carter responded firmly. The disappearance of a potential witness will not delay these proceedings. Cromwell sat at the defense table, his usual smirk replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tick in his jaw. His expensive suit couldn't hide the strain of watching his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. The morning's testimony focused on financial records revealed by Foster before his disappearance. A forensic accountant traced millions in suspicious transfers between Cromwell's campaign accounts and offshore shells linked to the Energy Corporation. Objection! Walsh jumped to his feet. This evidence was obtained illegally by a person who isn't even here to authenticate it. Perhaps you'd like to explain why he isn't here, Mr. Walsh. Carter's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Walsh paled slightly. Your Honor, I must object to the implication. Noted. Overruled. Continue with your testimony. During the Lunch recess. Carter received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single black feather and a dead sparrow. The message was clear, a warning that Foster's fate could befall others who spoke out. Carter shared the threat with federal investigators but insisted on continuing the afternoon session as scheduled. He wouldn't let intimidation tactics derail justice. Ana Morales worked her sources tirelessly, piecing together Foster's last known movements. Her investigation led her to a coffee shop near the courthouse where Foster had met someone the day before his disappearance. Young guy in a suit, the barista recalled. Nervous. Kept looking over his shoulder. The older man he met with. Expensive watch. Smelled like expensive cologne. They argued. Back in court, the afternoon brought a parade of expert witnesses, attempting to discredit Foster's evidence. Each one, under Carter's careful questioning, revealed connections to either Cromwell or the Energy Corporation. Dr. Peterson, Carter addressed one such expert. Could you explain why you received a $100,000 consulting fee from the Heritage Policy Institute 2 days after Foster's disappearance? The expert stammered, looked to Walsh for help, found none. In the gallery, Sarah Mitchell watched with growing concern. The disappearance of someone willing to stand up to Cromwell had shaken the community's confidence. Would justice prevail if witnesses feared for their lives? Tommy squeezed his mother's hand. Mom, is the judge going to be okay? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted outside the courtroom. Federal agents were escorting someone through. The courthouse, a familiar face from the security footage at the coffee shop. Carter called an immediate recess, meeting with investigators in his chambers. The man they'd arrested was James Wilson, a low-level employee at Cromwell's office. Under questioning, he'd cracked, revealing details about Foster's last known location. We've got teams searching an abandoned warehouse outside town, Detective Williams updated Carter. But sir, there's more. We found evidence of surveillance on your family, your son's college, your wife's office. Carter's expression hardened. Increase their security detail, and get me everything you have on Wilson's connections to Cromwell. The afternoon session resumed with an unexpected witness, Lisa Martinez, a custodian at Cromwell's office building. She nervously described overheard conversations about taking care of the Foster problem. Walsh objected repeatedly, but Carter allowed the testimony. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every word as Martinez described shredding parties and late-night meetings in the weeks following the fire. During her testimony, Cromwell's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous," he burst out. "You can't possibly believe this cleaning lady over a United States senator?" "Senator Cromwell," Carter's voice thundered through the courtroom, "you will maintain decorum in this court, or find yourself in contempt." The witness will continue. Outside, protest crowds had swelled with news of Foster's disappearance. Their signs now carried his photo alongside demands for justice. Among them, Ana Morales interviewed Foster's fiancée, Rachel Chen. "He knew the risks," Rachel said, wiping away tears. "But he said someone had to stand up to them. Those families lost everything in the fire. Michael couldn't live with himself if he stayed silent." Back in the courtroom, Carter reviewed new evidence from the FBI investigation. Wilson had already implicated several other Cromwell staffers in Foster's disappearance, and agents were closing in on the warehouse location. As the day's session wound down, Carter noticed something odd. Cromwell appeared almost relaxed, whispering and actually smiling with his legal team. The senator's sudden confidence set off warning bells. Carter's instincts proved correct. As he left the courthouse that evening, his security detail intercepted a suspicious package addressed to his chambers. The bomb squad later confirmed it contained an explosive device. That night, as Carter worked late in his study, his wife Marie brought him coffee and concerning news. "Nathan, someone followed Tommy from his classes today. Campus security intervened." But Carter set down his coffee, fury building behind his calm exterior. "They're getting desperate enough to make mistakes." A late-night call from Detective Williams confirmed his assessment. They'd found Foster, alive but badly beaten, in the warehouse. He was under protection at an undisclosed hospital, ready to testify as soon as he recovered. The next morning, Carter arrived at the courthouse to find Cromwell's smug confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. The senator huddled with his legal team, their whispered arguments carrying across the courtroom. Ana Morales broke the story of Foster's rescue online minutes before court convened. The gallery buzzed with the news, hope returning to the faces of Silver Ridge's residents. "Your Honor," Walsh began, his voice strained. "Given these developments, we request a brief continuance to—" "Denied," Carter cut him off. "This court has indulged enough delays. Mr. Foster will testify when he's medically cleared. Until then, we proceed with the evidence at hand." The morning's testimony focused on the warehouse where Foster had been held. FBI analysts traced the Auer property through a maze of shell companies back to a subsidiary of the Energy Corporation. During cross-examination, Walsh struggled to maintain his usual polish. His questions became increasingly desperate as each witness further connected Cromwell to both the infrastructure negligence and the attempt to silence Foster. At lunch, Carter met privately with federal prosecutors. They shared security camera footage showing James Wilson meeting with Cromwell's chief of staff the night Foster disappeared. The net was tightening. The afternoon brought a surprise witness, David Reynolds, former CEO of the Energy Corporation, now ready to testify about years of corruption and negligence. "We knew the infrastructure was failing," Reynolds testified. "But every time we proposed upgrades, Senator Cromwell's office found ways to block them. The money went to consulting. Fees, political contributions, offshore accounts." Walsh's objections grew more frantic with each revelation. Cromwell sat slumped in his chair, his earlier confidence evaporated. Outside the courthouse, Ana Morales interviewed Rachel Chen about Foster's rescue. "The doctors say he'll recover," Rachel shared. "He wants everyone to know he's still willing to testify. They can't scare him into silence." The day's final witness was an FBI forensic accountant who traced the money used to pay Foster's attackers. The evidence led directly to accounts controlled by Cromwell's Political Action Committee. As Carter prepared to adjourn for the day, Cromwell suddenly stood. "This is a witch hunt. You're all conspiring against me. I am a United States Senator." "Senator Cromwell!" Carter's voice cut through the outburst. "You are in contempt of court. Bailiff, please escort the senator to a holding cell until he can compose himself." The courtroom watched in shocked silence as Cromwell was led away, his protests echoing through the halls. His facade of power had finally cracked completely. That evening, Carter received word that Foster was awake and coherent, already providing detailed statements to federal investigators. The truth would come out, no matter how hard Cromwell and his allies tried to bury it. In the hospital, Foster lay connected to monitors, his face bruised but his spirit unbroken. "They kept asking what evidence I'd given to Judge Carter," he told investigators. "I told them the truth. Everything. Every document, every recording, every corrupt deal I witnessed." Back at the courthouse, Sarah Mitchell joined other residents in a candlelight vigil for Foster's recovery. Tommy helped pass out candles, his young face serious as he listened to stories about the man who'd risked everything for justice. Carter worked late again, reviewing Foster's new statements. Each page added another piece to the puzzle of corruption that had led to Silver Ridge's tragedy. The evidence was overwhelming, but he knew tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marie brought him dinner, concern evident in her eyes. "The threats, Nathan. They're getting worse." "I know," he replied, softly. "But we're close to the truth now. Too close to back down." A text from Detective Williams provided the final piece. They'd found Foster's laptop, hidden in the warehouse. Its contents would prove devastating to Cromwell's defense. The next morning, Carter entered his courtroom with renewed determination. The attempted silencing of a witness, the threats against his family, the bomb, all of it merely strengthened his resolve to see justice done. News cameras captured Cromwell's return to court, the senator's night in a holding cell evident in his rumpled appearance and wild eyes. His legal team looked equally disheveled, their usual confidence shattered. As Carter called the court to order, he surveyed the gallery. Sarah Mitchell and Tommy, their lives still disrupted by the fire. Rachel Chen, waiting for Foster to recover. Ana Morales, documenting every moment of the fight for justice. And dozens of Silver Ridge residents, their homes destroyed but their spirit unbroken. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Foster's rescue and willingness to testify had changed everything. Now it was just a matter of time before the full truth emerged. Carter's gavel fell, bringing the courtroom to attention. Outside, the morning sun broke through the lingering haze over Silver Ridge, a fitting metaphor for the light of truth finally piercing the darkness of corruption. The day's testimony would bring more revelations, more evidence, more steps toward justice. But for now, in this moment, Carter allowed himself a small smile. They had tried to silence the truth through violence and intimidation. They had failed. Justice would prevail, not just for Michael Foster or Silver Ridge, but for everyone who'd ever faced the choice between comfortable silence and costly truth. The price of speaking out might be high, but the cost of silence was immeasurably higher. Michael Foster's wheelchair squeaked slightly as federal marshals guided him into courtroom 3. His face still bore yellowing bruises, but his eyes held steady as they met Senator Cromwell's glare. Judge Nathaniel Carter watched the witnesses' entrance carefully, noting how the jury straightened in their seats. After days of documents and expert testimony, they were about to hear from the man who had risked everything to expose the truth. "Please, state your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "Michael Foster." His voice was quiet but clear. "And your former position?" "Senior aide to Senator Harold Cromwell, specifically handling infrastructure and energy policy." In the gallery, Anna Morales' pen flew across her notepad. Foster's testimony was going to be explosive, and she intended to capture every detail. Next to her, Rachel Chen gripped her hands tightly, watching her fiancé face the man who had ordered his beating. "Mr. Foster," the prosecutor continued, "please tell us about June 15th of last year." That was the day Senator Cromwell received the final safety report about Silver Ridge's power infrastructure. I personally handed him the document, which detailed imminent fire risks due to deteriorating equipment. And what was the senator's response? He laughed. Foster's voice hardened. He said, and I quote, "Property values in that area could use a good slash and burn." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Gregory Walsh jumped to his feet. "Objection. Hearsay." "Exception for party admission," Carter ruled smoothly. "Continue, Mr. Foster." The senator then made several calls, one to the CEO of the Energy Corporation, another to the insurance companies. He talked about opportunities and market corrections. Within hours, he had redirected the infrastructure repair budget to shareholder dividends. As Foster testified, Cromwell's facade began to crack. His manicured nails dug into the defense table's wooden surface, leaving marks. His face flushed darker with each revelation. "And what happened after the fires?" the prosecutor asked. The senator was pleased. He'd already positioned shell companies to buy up the devalued land. The insurance companies were denying claims, based on prearranged agreements. Everything was going according to plan. Walsh attempted to object again, but Carter waved him down. The truth needed to be heard. Foster continued, detailing years of corruption, backroom deals, and calculated negligence. He produced emails, recordings, and financial records, all recovered from the laptop found in the warehouse where he'd been. "Held captive, Your Honor," Walsh interrupted. "We contest the authenticity of these records. They could have been altered during Mr. Foster's absence." "The FBI cyber forensics team has verified all documents," the prosecutor countered. "We can call their expert to testify." "Proceed," Carter ordered, watching Cromwell's increasing agitation. During cross-examination, Walsh tried to paint Foster as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. "Isn't it true you were passed over for promotion 3 times?" "No," Foster replied, calmly. "I was offered promotions repeatedly but declined them. Each promotion came with requirements to participate in activities I found ethically questionable." "You expect us to believe you chose to remain in a lower position?" "I chose to remain in a position where I could document the corruption I witnessed. Someone had to stand up for the people of Silver Ridge." In the gallery, Sarah Mitchell wiped away tears. Tommy squeezed her hand, understanding for the first time the true courage it took to stand up to powerful people. The afternoon session brought Anna Morales to the stand. She presented her investigation's findings, including emails between Cromwell and insurance executives discussing ways to maximize profits from the upcoming market adjustment in Silver Ridge. These emails were sent 2 weeks before the fires, Anna testified. They were already planning how to profit from a disaster that hadn't happened yet. Cromwell's control finally snapped. "You stupid girl," he shouted. "You have no idea how things work in the real world." Senator Cromwell, Carter's voice cut through the outburst like steel. "Control yourself or be removed. You can't remove me. Do you know who I am? I made this town. I can break it just as easily." The courtroom fell silent, stunned by Cromwell's admission. Carter's gavel cracked sharply. "The jury will disregard." The senator's outburst. "Mr. Walsh, control your client." But Cromwell was beyond control. "You think you can judge me?" He sneered at Carter. "A diversity hire playing at justice? I've bought and sold better judges than you." "Senator Cromwell, you are in contempt of court," Carter declared, his voice steady despite the blatant racism. "Bailiff, remove him until he can compose himself." As Cromwell was led away, still shouting threats and slurs, Walsh slumped in his chair. His client had just destroyed any sympathy the jury might have had. The prosecution called their next witness, James Wilson, the aide who had helped coordinate Foster's abduction. Having accepted a plea deal, he detailed Cromwell's direct orders to silence the leak permanently. The senator was explicit. Wilson testified nervously. He said to make it look like an accident, but ensure Foster couldn't testify. During the lunch recess, Carter received word that federal agents had raided Cromwell's offices and home, finding shredded documents that further confirmed Foster's testimony. The conspiracy was unraveling rapidly. Back in session, the prosecution presented their final witness, Robert Martinez, former vice president of the Energy Corporation. He had also accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. "We knew the infrastructure was failing," Martinez admitted. "But Senator Cromwell assured us he would block any regulatory oversight. In return, we provided campaign contributions and positions on corporate boards for his family members." Walsh barely bothered to cross-examine Martinez. The defense was crumbling, and everyone knew it. When Cromwell returned to court, he was unnaturally subdued, likely sedated by his legal team. But his eyes burned with hatred as Foster concluded his testimony. "One final question," the prosecutor addressed Foster. "Why did you come forward?" Foster glanced at the Silver Ridge residents in the gallery. "Because every person in this town lost something: homes, memories, treasured possessions. They deserved to know why. They deserved justice." The defense presented their case half-heartedly. Their expert witnesses wilted under cross-examination, their claims of natural disasters and unforeseeable circumstances falling apart. As the day drew to a close, Carter called both legal teams to his chambers. "I understand the prosecution has additional evidence regarding insurance fraud?" "Yes, Your Honor," the prosecutor confirmed. "Federal investigators have uncovered a pattern of similar schemes in other communities. Silver Ridge wasn't the first, just the largest." Carter nodded grimly. "Present it tomorrow. The jury should understand the full scope." That evening, as Carter left the courthouse, he passed Sarah Mitchell talking with Michael Foster. The former aide was apologizing for not coming forward sooner. "You risked everything to tell the truth," Sarah told him, tears in her eyes. "We can never repay that." The next morning brought new revelations. The prosecution presented evidence of similar infrastructure negligence in other towns under Cromwell's influence. Each case followed the same pattern: blocked repairs, convenient fires, denied insurance claims, and property bought by shell companies. This wasn't just corruption, the prosecutor told the jury. This was a business model, a calculated scheme to profit from preventable tragedies. During morning recess, Ana Morales updated her growing audience. Her coverage had attracted national attention, with major networks picking up the story. Silver Ridge had become a symbol of the fight against corporate greed and political corruption. Back in court, the defense attempted to shift blame to lower-level employees. Walsh argued that Cromwell had been unaware of the details of infrastructure decisions. "Are we to believe," the prosecutor countered, "that a man who micromanaged every aspect of his office somehow missed millions in suspicious transactions and years of falsified safety reports?" As evidence mounted, Cromwell's sedated calm cracked again. "They should be thanking me," he burst out. "I improved their worthless town. Who cares about a few lost photo albums when progress is at stake?" Carter's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Senator Cromwell, this is your final warning. One more outburst and you'll be barred from your own trial." The afternoon brought closing arguments. The prosecution methodically laid out the conspiracy: the ignored warnings, the diverted funds, the calculated profiteering, and the violent attempt to silence the truth. Walsh's closing argument was brief and resigned. He asked the jury to consider the complexity of modern governance and the challenges of balancing progress with regulation. As the jury retired to deliberate, Carter noticed something had changed in the gallery. The anger and fear that had filled the courtroom for weeks had been replaced by something else: hope. The deliberations lasted less than 4 hours. As the jury filed back in, their faces told the story before the foreman could speak. On the yes charge of criminal negligence resulting in public endangerment, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of witness tampering and attempted murder, guilty. Count after count, the verdict remained the same. Cromwell stood motionless as his world collapsed around him. Walsh placed a restraining hand on his arm, but the senator shrugged it off. "This is a joke," Cromwell shouted. "I'll have this overturned. I'll own this town again. You'll all regret crossing me." "Senator Cromwell," Carter's voice filled the courtroom, "you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. Bailiff, please escort the defendant out." As Cromwell was led away in handcuffs, still shouting threats, Sarah Mitchell hugged Tommy tightly. Around them, other Silver Ridge residents wept, embraced, and began to believe in justice again. Foster sat with Rachel, their hands clasped together. The price of truth had been high, but watching Cromwell face consequences made it worthwhile. Anna. Morales finished her final article about the trial, her words capturing both the verdict and its deeper meaning. Today, in a courthouse in Silver Ridge, money and power yielded to something stronger: the truth. Carter remained seated as the courtroom slowly emptied. He thought about all the forces that had tried to derail justice: the threats, the bribes, the intimidation. None of it had worked. Outside, the sun was setting over Silver Ridge. The scars of the fires were still visible, but healing had begun. Insurance companies, fearing further investigation, had suddenly become cooperative about claims. The energy corporation's new management was fast-tracking infrastructure repairs. More importantly, the people of Silver Ridge had their dignity back. They had stood up to corruption and won. Their story would inspire others to demand accountability from the powerful. As Carter finally rose to leave, he saw Tommy Mitchell picking up his dropped astronaut toy near the gallery. The boy looked up at him with clear, hopeful eyes. "Thank you, Judge Carter," Tommy said simply. Carter smiled, remembering why he had become a judge in the first place. Not for power or prestige, but for moments like this, when justice prevailed and renewed people's faith in the system. Tomorrow would bring sentencing hearings, civil suits, and the long process of rebuilding Silver Ridge. But tonight, justice had been served. The truth had emerged, not in whispers and shadows, but in the clear light of a courtroom where all stood equal before the law. As Carter left the courthouse, he saw the evening news crews setting up for their broadcasts. The story of Silver Ridge would spread, reminding others that no one was above the law. It had taken courage, from Foster, from the residents, from everyone who chose truth over comfort, but justice had prevailed. The night settled over Silver Ridge, but this time it brought peace instead of fear. In the shelter, Sarah Mitchell and Tommy slept soundly, knowing that tomorrow would bring hope instead of despair. Outside Cromwell's empty mansion, federal agents continued gathering evidence of other schemes, other towns that needed justice. And in his chambers, Judge Nathaniel Carter began writing his sentencing memorandum, ensuring that the full story of Silver Ridge's tragedy and triumph would be preserved in the legal record. Future generations would know that when corruption and greed threatened a community, ordinary people had found the courage to stand up and demand justice. The truth had won. Not easily, not quickly, but finally and completely. Silver Ridge would rebuild, stronger for having faced down corruption and emerged victorious. The power of justice had prevailed over the justice of power, and a new chapter was about to begin. Judge Nathaniel Carter stood at his bench, the weight of the moment pressing down like a physical force. The sentencing hearing for Senator Harold. Cromwell had drawn an overflow crowd, with monitors set up in adjacent courtrooms to accommodate everyone who wanted to witness justice being served. Will the defendant please rise? Carter's deep voice carried authority earned through weeks of maintaining order, despite Cromwell's attempts to derail the proceedings. Cromwell stood slowly, his designer suit now wrinkled from weeks in custody. The swagger was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tick in his jaw. His legal team flanked him, Gregory Walsh looking equally defeated. Senator Harold Cromwell, Carter began. This court has considered your crimes, their impact on the community, and the broader implications for public trust. Your actions demonstrate not just corruption, but a fundamental contempt for the people you were elected to serve. The courtroom was silent as Carter continued. You turned a preventable tragedy into an opportunity for personal profit. When exposed, you attempted to silence the truth through violence. You have shown no remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives you've destroyed. Carter paused, surveying the gallery. Sarah Mitchell sat with Tommy, who clutched his rescued astronaut toy. Michael Foster and Rachel Chen held hands, their faces tense. Anna Morales' pen moved rapidly across her notepad. For the charges of criminal negligence resulting in public endangerment, this court sentences you to 15 years. For conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, 10 years. For witness tampering and attempted murder, 20 years. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. A murmur ran through the courtroom as people calculated 45 years. At Cromwell's age, it was effectively a life sentence. Additionally, Carter continued, you are ordered to pay restitution to the victims of the Silver Ridge fires, with the amount to be determined in civil proceedings. All assets gained through your criminal activities will be forfeited. Cromwell's facade finally cracked completely. You can't do this to me, he shouted. I'll have your job for this. I still have friends in high places. Remove the defendant, Carter ordered calmly. As Cromwell was led away, still shouting threats, the judge added, this court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the mood was complex, relief mixed with lingering pain. The victims had won their case, but no verdict could restore what they'd lost. It doesn't bring back my grandmother's quilts, Sarah Mitchell told reporters, wiping away tears. It doesn't give Tommy back his childhood home, but at least there's accountability. At least someone stood up and said what happened to us was wrong. Back in his chambers, Carter reviewed the morning's events with his clerk. The civil suits will begin next week. Make sure we have extra security. Cromwell's allies won't take this lying down. He was right. Within hours, conservative media outlets began running stories questioning the verdict. Political persecution? One headline blared. Judge's bias taints trial, claimed another. Anna Morales tracked the emerging narrative with growing concern. Her sources reported that Cromwell, even from his prison cell, was orchestrating a campaign to discredit both the verdict and Judge Carter. That evening, as Carter worked late in his chambers, a junior clerk delivered an unmarked envelope. Inside was a USB drive containing what appeared to be evidence of judicial misconduct, all of it carefully fabricated. They're trying to build a case for appeal, Carter told federal investigators. Make it look like I had personal bias against Cromwell. The Next day brought more attacks. A conservative legal foundation filed a complaint against Carter with the Judicial Review Board, citing unprecedented bias and political motivation in his handling of the case. In prison, Cromwell had already established himself in the white-collar wing, using his remaining connections to maintain influence. His first target was Judge Carter's reputation. Look into his family, Cromwell instructed his remaining allies during a carefully monitored prison visit. Everyone has secrets. Find them. The pressure began to mount. Carter's wife, Marie, found photographers following her to work. Their son's college applications mysteriously encountered processing issues. Anonymous threats arrived daily, but the people of Silver Ridge refused to let their victory be undermined. When a rally was organized questioning Carter's integrity, hundreds of residents showed up to counter-protest, carrying signs reading "Carter stood for us" and "Truth can't be bought." The Energy Corporation, sensing the shifting winds, issued a carefully worded public apology and offered a settlement to the victims. The amount was substantial, but came with a catch. They wanted no admission of criminal wrongdoing. "It's blood. Money," Foster told the victims' committee. "They're trying to buy silence while keeping their corporate reputation intact." Sarah Mitchell and other community leaders faced a difficult choice. The settlement would help families rebuild, but accepting it meant letting the corporation avoid full accountability. Meanwhile, Carter faced his own challenges. The Judicial Review Board launched an investigation into the complaints against him. Though he knew they were baseless, the process itself was draining. "They're trying to make an example of you," his old mentor, retired Judge William Henderson, warned during a private lunch. "Show other judges what happens when you challenge power." Carter remained unmoved. "Let them try. The truth is already on record." But the attacks escalated. Someone leaked Carter's son's college application essays to a right-wing website, complete with manufactured plagiarism accusations. Marie's employer suddenly faced regulatory scrutiny. Even their family dog disappeared, only to return days later, traumatized but alive. The message was clear. Cromwell's network extended far beyond Silver Ridge, and they were willing to target anyone who had helped bring him down. Anna Morales discovered just how far when her editor called her into his office. "We're getting pressure from advertisers," he explained uncomfortably. "They want us to drop the Silver Ridge coverage." "It's not over," Anna protested. "I've found evidence linking the corporation to similar schemes in other towns." "Let it go, Anna. We can't afford this fight." She refused to back down, instead taking her investigation freelance. Within days, she had uncovered documents suggesting the corporation had already identified other communities with aging infrastructure, potential targets for their next market adjustment. At the federal courthouse, Carter presided over the civil proceedings with characteristic dignity. Despite the growing pressure, the evidence of broader corruption continued to mount, but so did the resistance to exposing it. "Your Honor," a corporate lawyer argued, "these document requests are overly broad. You're asking for proprietary business information." "I'm asking for evidence of criminal conspiracy," Carter corrected firmly. "The subpoenas stand." During a recess, Carter received word that his mentor, Judge Henderson, had been hospitalized with suspicious food poisoning. Another warning. Another attempt at intimidation. The residents of Silver Ridge rallied around their judge. They organized neighborhood watches around his home, documented every suspicious incident, and showed up in force to counter each protest, questioning his integrity. Tommy Mitchell even started a social media campaign called Kids for Carter, sharing stories of how the judge had helped their community find justice. The hashtag went viral, drawing national attention to the ongoing attempts at intimidation. But the pressure took its toll. Carter's wife began suffering anxiety attacks. Their son considered transferring colleges to escape the harassment. The judge himself developed insomnia, spending long nights reviewing case law, preparing for the appeals he knew were coming. In prison, Cromwell received regular updates on the campaign against Carter. The former senator's influence had diminished, but not disappeared. He still had allies in state government, in corporate boardrooms, in media outlets willing to spin his narrative. "The judge thinks he's won," Cromwell told a visiting associate. Show him what winning costs. The next morning, Carter arrived at the courthouse to find his parking spot lined with dead ravens, a crude but clear threat. Security footage had mysteriously malfunctioned during the night. Inside, the civil proceedings continued. The Energy Corporation's lawyers fought every document request, every deposition, every attempt to expose the full scope of their corruption. But they couldn't stop everything. Foster's rescued laptop had contained enough evidence to launch investigations. In other states, similar patterns emerged: aging infrastructure, blocked repairs, suspicious fires, denied insurance claims. Ana Morales, now publishing her investigation through an independent news site, connected the dots. The corporation had turned disaster profiteering into a business model, with willing partners in insurance companies and corrupt politicians. Carter reviewed each new piece of evidence carefully, building a record that would withstand appeal. He knew Cromwell's allies would challenge every ruling, every admission, every procedural decision. The civil suit slowly progressed, despite the delays and obstruction. The Energy Corporation's lawyers fought hardest against discovery requests about other communities, desperate to prevent a broader pattern from emerging. Your Honor, their lead attorney argued, these requests go far beyond the scope of the Silver Ridge incident. The pattern of behavior is relevant to punitive damages, Carter ruled. The requests stand. That evening, as Carter left the courthouse, he found Marie waiting in his chambers. "Nathan, they're not going to stop," she said softly. "Maybe we should consider your mentor's advice about stepping back." Carter took her hand gently. "If we back down now, they win. Not just here, but everywhere they're running this scheme." Sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost. The next day brought news that Foster had received death threats in the federal witness protection program. Rachel was moved to a separate safe house, their wedding plans indefinitely postponed. "They're trying to make an example of all of us," Foster told federal investigators. "Show what happens to whistleblowers who expose corporate corruption." But Silver Ridge refused to be silenced. The community organized fundraisers to help families, still struggling with temporary housing. Local contractors offered discounted repairs. Children held bake sales to help their neighbors. Tommy Mitchell sold his beloved video game console to contribute to the community fund. "Judge Carter taught us to stand up for what's right," he told his mother, "even when it's hard." The civil proceedings revealed more corruption with each passing day. Insurance executives admitted to coordinating claim denials with the corporation. Safety inspectors confessed to accepting bribes. Local officials acknowledged looking the other way. Carter managed each revelation with steady purpose, building a record that would expose not just one incident of corruption, but an entire system of exploitation. "Your Honor," the victim's lawyer addressed the court, "we've uncovered evidence of similar schemes in 12 other communities. This was never about one town or one fire. This was about turning tragedy into profit, over and over again." The Energy Corporation's lawyers grew increasingly desperate. They offered larger settlements, demanded more delays, filed endless motions. But the truth continued to emerge. Ana Morales' investigation revealed offshore accounts, shell companies, and a network of corruption spanning multiple states. Each discovery brought more threats, more pressure to stay quiet. But Silver Ridge had learned the cost of silence. They had paid for it with their homes, their memories, their sense of security. They wouldn't pay that price again. As the civil proceedings neared their end, Carter received one final threat: a comprehensive dossier on his family, detailing their vulnerabilities. The message was clear: back off, or watch your loved ones suffer. Carter brought the dossier to federal investigators, then returned to court. He had a job to do, a duty to fulfill. The people of Silver Ridge deserved justice, no matter the personal cost. In his prison cell, Cromwell received word that his intimidation campaign had failed. The judge wouldn't bend. The community wouldn't break. The truth wouldn't stay buried. The former senator raged at his visitors, demanded more pressure, more threats, more retaliation. But his power was fading. Each failed attempt at intimidation only strengthened the resolve of those he targeted. As Carter prepared his final ruling on the civil suits, He thought about all the forces that had tried to derail justice. The threats, the lies, the attacks on his family. None of it had worked. Silver Ridge had shown him why. The community had stood together, supported each other, refused to be silenced. They had turned their tragedy into a testament to the power of truth and solidarity. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more fights for justice, more attempts to shield the powerful from accountability. But tonight, Carter could take satisfaction in knowing that the truth had prevailed. The people of Silver Ridge had lost their homes, but found their voice. They had faced down corruption and won. Their story would inspire others to stand up, speak out, demand justice. As the sun set over the rebuilding town, Carter knew that the cost of doing right had been high, but the cost of doing nothing would have been infinitely higher. The battle wasn't over. It never really would be. But Silver Ridge had shown that when people stood together for truth and justice, not even the most powerful forces could silence them. Judge William Henderson's private study felt different tonight. The familiar leather chairs and wall of legal texts that had once provided comfort to Nathaniel Carter now seemed somehow tainted. His mentor of 30 years sat across from him, swirling a glass of bourbon, choosing his words carefully. "Nathan, you need to step back from this," Henderson said quietly. "The system wasn't built to withstand this kind of pressure. Nobody will protect you when they come for your reputation." Carter studied his mentor's face, noting the slight tremor in his hands, the way he wouldn't quite meet his eyes. "Bill, what aren't you telling me?" "They have fabricated evidence, convincing evidence, linking you to Cromwell's early ventures. Emails, photos, wire transfers, they'll destroy everything you've built." "And you believe I should let that threat stop justice from being served?" Henderson set down his glass harder than necessary. "I believe you should be pragmatic. You've won the criminal case. Cromwell's in prison. Take the win and walk away before they bury you." The drive home from his mentor's house was long and quiet. Carter had always known there would be resistance to exposing corruption, but he hadn't expected it from the man who had taught him to believe in justice above all else. His phone buzzed, Anna Morales requesting an urgent meeting. They met in a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, where Anna pushed a folder across the table. "Someone sent this to my editor," she said grimly. "They're claiming you had prior business dealings with Cromwell, that you helped him set up the original shell companies in exchange for a percentage." Carter opened the folder. The documents inside were masterfully crafted, emails that looked authentic, financial records that told a convincing story of corruption. If he hadn't known they were fake, he might have believed them himself. "They're going to run it, aren't they?" Anna nodded. "Tomorrow morning. The editor refused to let me investigate the source, said the documents speak for themselves. And you? Do you believe them?" "I believe in what I've seen in that courtroom. I believe in the judge who stood up to power and refused to back down." She paused. "But they're going to destroy your reputation, unless we can prove these are forgeries." The next morning's headlines were brutal. "Judge Carter's corrupt past exposed," screamed the local paper. National media picked up the story within hours. The carefully crafted narrative painted Carter as a longtime conspirator who had turned on Cromwell only after being cut out of larger profits. In his chambers, Carter reviewed messages from colleagues suddenly too busy to return his calls, from organizations rescinding speaking invitations, from friends making excuses to cancel dinner plans. The isolation was swift and calculated. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the courthouse with Tommy, pushing through reporters to reach Carter's chambers. "We know it's lies," she said firmly. "The whole town knows it's lies. We're behind you, Judge Carter." Tommy nodded earnestly. "You helped us get justice. Now we'll help you get justice too." But the machinery of destruction was already in motion. The Judicial Review Board announced an emergency investigation. Political commentators demanded Carter's resignation. Social media exploded with conspiracy theories about his past. In prison, Cromwell watched the chaos unfold on his television, with obvious satisfaction. His smirk had returned as he gave interviews claiming Carter had been his business partner for years before their falling out over profits from the Silver Ridge scheme. "I deeply regret my actions," Cromwell told reporters, with practiced sincerity. "But the public deserves to know the truth about Judge Carter's involvement. His self-righteous condemnation of me in court was the height of hypocrisy." The evidence against Carter seemed to multiply daily. More emails emerged, showing apparent conversations about property acquisitions and insurance fraud. Photos appeared of Carter and Cromwell at social events, doctored to suggest a closer relationship than their occasional professional interactions. Ana Morales worked tirelessly to investigate the document's origins, but hit walls at every turn. Sources went silent. Records became suddenly unavailable. Even Foster's rescued laptop had been mysteriously corrupted, key files now unrecoverable. "They're not just trying to discredit you," Anna told Carter during another late-night diner meeting. "They're trying to erase the truth about Silver Ridge completely. Make everyone doubt everything that happened in that courtroom." Carter's home. Phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comment. Marie fielded calls from concerned relatives and friends asking if the allegations were true. Their son faced whispers and stares at college, his father's name now a source of shame rather than pride. The betrayals kept coming. Carter's court clerk, David Parker, gave an interview claiming he had witnessed suspicious meetings and phone calls. The same clerk who had worked with Carter for 5 years, who had seen firsthand his dedication to justice, now painted him as a corrupt conspirator. "I should have spoken up sooner," Parker told reporters, his performance worthy of an actor. "But I was afraid of retaliation. Judge Carter had everyone fooled with his act of integrity." The Friday morning after the allegations broke, Carter arrived at the courthouse to find Judge Henderson waiting in his chambers. His mentor's face was grave. "The Judicial Review Board is suspending you pending their investigation," Henderson said without preamble. "I've been assigned to take over your cases." Carter sat heavily in his chair. "You knew this was coming. That's why you warned me to back off." "I tried to protect you, Nathan. You wouldn't listen." "Protect me? Or protect the system that enables corruption?" Henderson's face hardened. "You've always been an idealist, but the real world requires compromise. Accepting that some battles can't be won, the real world requires people willing to stand up for truth no matter the cost." "And what has that gotten you?" Henderson gestured at the newspaper headlines scattered across Carter's desk. "Your reputation is destroyed. Your career is over." "Was it worth it?" Before Carter could respond, Ana Morales burst into his chambers, out of breath and clutching her laptop. "Judge Carter, we found something." She pulled up emails showing the coordinated effort to destroy Carter's reputation. The timestamps proved they had been planning this attack since before the trial began, anticipating they might need to discredit him. "This proves the allegations are false," Anna said excitedly. "They fabricated everything to—" "It proves nothing," Henderson interrupted. "Those emails could easily have been falsified, just as you claim the evidence against Nathan was falsified." "The damage is done." Carter watched his mentor carefully. "You've known about this from the beginning, haven't you, Bill? That's why you pushed me to drop the civil cases. You're part of this." Henderson's silence was answer enough. 30 years of mentorship and friendship crumbled in that moment of betrayal. "Get out of my chambers," Carter said quietly. "Both of you." Anna started to protest, but Carter held up his hand. "I need time to think." Left alone, Carter stared at the law books lining his walls. Each volume represented years of studying justice, believing in the system's ability to serve truth. Now, that same system was being used to bury the truth. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mitchell. "Emergency community meeting tonight. We're not giving up on you." The meeting was held in the high school gymnasium, the same space that had housed fire victims months ago. Hundreds of Silver Ridge residents packed the bleachers, their faces determined. "We know who Judge Carter is," Sarah told the crowd. "We watched him stand up to power when nobody else would. These lies won't change that." Tommy stepped forward, still clutching his astronaut toy. "Judge Carter taught us that telling the truth matters more than being powerful. Now it's our turn to tell the truth about him. The community organized teams to investigate the false evidence, to support Anna's reporting, to counter the narrative being spread about their judge. They might not have the resources of Cromwell's allies, but they had something more powerful: first-hand knowledge of the truth. Back in his chambers, Carter reviewed the fabricated evidence against him. The forgeries were sophisticated, but they had one fatal flaw. They contradicted the actual record of his life's work. Decades of fighting corruption couldn't be erased by manufactured emails and doctored photos. Anna Morales worked through the night, tracing the digital breadcrumbs of the conspiracy. The deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became. The same people who had helped Cromwell profit from tragedy were now working to discredit anyone who exposed their schemes. "They're desperate," she told Carter the next morning. "They're not just worried about Silver Ridge anymore. This is about preventing other communities from fighting back." The Judicial Review Board scheduled Carter's hearing for Monday morning. Henderson would lead the panel, a final twist of betrayal. The message was clear: accept defeat gracefully or be destroyed completely. Marie found Carter in his study that Sunday night, surrounded by case files and legal precedents. "Whatever you decide," she said softly, "I'm with you." "They want me to apologize," he replied. "Issue a statement taking responsibility for errors in judgment, and quietly resign. Make it all go away. And if you refuse, they'll take everything. My reputation, my career, my pension. Make sure no one ever trusts me again." Marie touched his hand gently. "They can't take who you are. They can't take what you did for Silver Ridge." Monday morning arrived with new headlines: Carter to face judicial review, and Silver Ridge judges fall from grace. But something else was happening too. Residents of other towns where the Energy Corporation had operated began coming forward with similar stories. Anna's reporting had inspired others to investigate, to question, to demand answers. As Carter prepared to face the review board, his phone buzzed with another text, this one from his former clerk, David Parker. "I'm sorry. They made me lie. I have proof of their threats." The web of corruption was unraveling, but would it happen fast enough to save Carter's reputation? The forces aligned against him were powerful, determined to bury the truth under an avalanche of lies. In his prison cell, Cromwell received updates about the smear campaign's progress. But his satisfaction was tempered by growing concern. More whistleblowers were coming forward. More communities were launching investigations. The truth was proving harder to kill than he'd anticipated. Carter straightened his tie and prepared to enter the hearing room. Outside, supporters gathered with signs reading, "We stand with Judge Carter," and "Truth over Power." Sarah Mitchell and Tommy stood at the front of the crowd. The boy had added a small black robe to his astronaut toy, a silent statement of support for the judge who had fought for their community. The battle for truth wasn't over. The betrayals hurt deeply, especially from those Carter had trusted most. But Silver Ridge had taught him something powerful. When people united behind the truth, even the most carefully constructed lies began to crack. Henderson might have chosen pragmatism over principle, but Carter would stay true to the ideals that had guided his career. The cost would be high, but the cost of silence would be infinitely higher. As he opened the hearing room door, Carter thought of Tommy's astronaut toy, now wearing its makeshift judge's robe. Sometimes justice required seeing things from a higher perspective, remembering what truly mattered. The truth about Silver Ridge couldn't be erased, no matter how many lies they piled on top of it. Carter would fight for that truth, just as the community fought for him. Some battles were worth losing everything to win. The town hall of Silver Ridge was packed beyond capacity. Judge Nathaniel Carter stood at the podium, facing hundreds of faces he'd come to know through months of trial and tribulation. Outside, hundreds more watched on screens hastily set up in the parking lot. They had come to hear their judge speak his truth. "I grew up in a world that didn't expect much from someone who looked like me," Carter began, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But my father taught me something important. He said that justice isn't about what people expect, it's about what's right. In the front row, Sarah Mitchell dabbed at her eyes while Tommy sat straight-backed, still clutching his robed astronaut toy. Anna Morales recorded everything, her laptop open to a document that would become her most important story yet. When I became a judge, I swore an oath to uphold the law without fear or favor. That oath didn't come with exceptions for powerful people or difficult circumstances. It didn't have a clause about looking the other way when justice becomes inconvenient. Carter paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Over these past months, we've seen what happens when people choose truth over comfort, integrity over expedience. The people of Silver Ridge lost their homes, but you never lost your courage. You stood up to power and demanded accountability. In his prison cell, Senator Harold Cromwell watched the live stream with growing fury. His attempts to destroy Carter's reputation had backfired spectacularly. Instead of silencing the truth, the smear campaign had only amplified it. They tried to bury us, Carter continued. But they forgot something important. Truth doesn't stay buried. It grows. It spreads. It finds the light. The evidence that had seemed so damaging just days ago now lay in shambles. David Parker, Carter's former clerk, had come forward with recordings of the threats that had forced him to lie. Anna's investigation had traced the fabricated emails and doctored photos to a PR firm on Cromwell's payroll. But the biggest blow had come from an unexpected source. Judge William Henderson, Carter's mentor-turned-betrayer, had suffered a crisis of conscience. Faced with the community's unwavering support for Carter, he had broken down and confessed his role in the conspiracy. The system isn't perfect, Carter acknowledged. But it's not the system that failed Silver Ridge. It was people who failed. People who chose profit over safety, power over responsibility, lies over truth. In the audience, Michael Foster sat with Rachel Chen, both finally free from witness protection. The wider exposure of Cromwell's corruption had brought forward so many witnesses that no single person could be targeted anymore. This was never just about one town or one case, Carter continued. Across the country, communities like ours faced the same choice: accept injustice or stand up and fight. Silver Ridge chose to fight. The Energy Corporation's CEO had resigned in disgrace after emails surfaced showing his knowledge of similar schemes in other towns. Insurance companies, facing multiple investigations, had suddenly discovered a conscience and were expediting claims. They thought they could silence us with threats, discredit us with lies, wear us down with legal maneuvers, but they didn't understand something fundamental about this community. You don't measure wealth in dollars here. You measure it in integrity, in solidarity, in the courage to stand for what's right. Sarah Mitchell nodded firmly. The settlement. Money had finally come through, not just from the corporation but from insurance companies eager to avoid further scrutiny. All across Silver Ridge, rebuilding had begun in earnest. Look around. Carter gestured to the walls of the town hall. 6 months ago, this building was a shelter for families who'd lost everything. Today, it's full of people who've rediscovered something powerful: their voice. Tommy's astronaut toy still wore its makeshift judge's robe, now accompanied by a small gavel he'd crafted himself. The boy had started a school club dedicated to civic engagement, inspired by what he'd witnessed in Carter's courtroom. When they tried to destroy my reputation, you didn't waver. When they presented false evidence, you demanded the truth. When they threatened our community, you stood together. That's not just inspiring, it's a blueprint for fighting corruption everywhere. Anna's reporting had sparked a national conversation about corporate accountability. Other communities had begun investigating similar patterns of infrastructure, neglect, and disaster profiteering. The blueprint Carter spoke of was already being followed. Justice isn't just a word in law books. It's not just something that happens in courtrooms. Justice is what occurs when ordinary people refuse to accept corruption as normal, refuse to be silenced by power, refuse to look away from truth. In the back of the hall, Carter spotted Agent Williams from the FBI. The investigation had expanded far beyond Silver Ridge, uncovering a nationwide network of corruption. Cromwell's imprisonment was just the beginning. They thought if they attacked me, they could make you doubt everything that happened in that courtroom. They thought they could make you question whether justice was even possible against such powerful forces. Carter's wife Marie sat with their son, both beaming with pride. The threats against their family had ended as more conspirators came forward, each seeking leniency in exchange for testimony. But something happened that they didn't expect. Instead of running from the fight, more people joined it. Instead of accepting their lies, you demanded truth. Instead of doubting justice, you helped create it. The town hall erupted in applause, but Carter raised his hand for quiet. He wasn't finished. Today, I'm announcing something important. The Judicial Review Board has not only cleared me of all allegations, but they've also opened investigations into those who attempted to obstruct justice through false accusations. Another cheer went up. Henderson would face consequences for his role in the conspiracy, along with others who had chosen the wrong side of history. But that's not the most important announcement. The Silver Ridge Community Trust, funded by the settlements and fines from this case, will help other towns fight similar battles. No community should have to face corruption alone. Sarah Mitchell stood up, tears flowing freely now. The trust had been her idea, a way to ensure that Silver Ridge's victory would help others find justice. Because that's what justice really means. It's not just punishing the guilty, it's helping others stand up to power. It's not just winning one case, it's changing the system that allowed corruption to flourish. Tommy raised his astronaut toy high, its little robe and gavel catching the light. Around him, other children did the same with their own toys, a forest of small symbols of justice rising in the air. Silver Ridge lost its homes but found its voice. We lost buildings but built something stronger, a community united by truth and courage that can never be burned down, bought off, or buried in lies. Carter's voice grew stronger as he reached his conclusion. They thought they could break us. Instead, we got stronger. They thought they could silence us. Instead, we spoke louder. They thought they could stop justice. Instead, we showed them what justice really means. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. When it finally quieted, Carter stepped away from the podium to embrace Sarah and Tommy Mitchell. The boy's astronaut toy now sported a small silver ridge across its base, a permanent reminder of their journey. Outside, the rebuilt town sparkled in the summer sun. New homes rose where ashes had been, each one constructed with upgraded safety, features, and modern infrastructure. The power lines that had sparked the tragedy had been completely replaced. Anna Morales posted her story about Carter's speech within the hour. Silver Ridge, a blueprint for justice, would go on to win a Pulitzer Prize, but more importantly, it would inspire other communities to stand up to corruption. In his prison cell, Cromwell watched his remaining influence crumble. His former allies abandoned him as investigations spread, each seeking to save themselves by exposing more of the conspiracy. Foster and Rachel finally held their long-delayed wedding in the new Silver Ridge Community Center. Judge Carter officiated, his words about love and commitment carrying extra weight after everything they'd been through. The Energy Corporation's new management implemented comprehensive safety reforms, knowing they were under intense public scrutiny. Insurance companies revised their policies, removing the loopholes that had allowed them to deny valid claims. Tommy's Civic Engagement Club grew into a national youth movement, connecting young people who wanted to fight corruption in their own communities. The astronaut toy became their symbol, a reminder that justice requires seeing things from a higher perspective. Sarah Mitchell opened a community advocacy center in the rebuilt downtown, helping other towns navigate legal challenges and corporate negligence. The lessons of Silver Ridge became a resource for communities across the country. Judge Carter returned to his courtroom, but something had changed. The gallery was often full of observers from other towns, taking notes on how to fight corruption in their own communities. Justice was contagious. Marie Carter started a support network for families facing corporate negligence, turning her own experience with intimidation into a resource for others. The network quickly spread nationwide. The Silver Ridge Community Trust funded its first case 3 months later, helping a small town in Michigan fight against industrial pollution. The Trust's legal team included many of the lawyers who had worked on the original case. Carter's chambers became a regular stop for law students studying judicial integrity. The judge always showed them the small astronaut toy Tommy had given, him, complete with robe and gavel. "Remember," he would tell them, "justice isn't about power or position. It's about ordinary people choosing to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost." As summer turned to fall, Silver Ridge celebrated its rebirth with a community festival. The scars of the fire remained, but they had been transformed into something powerful, a reminder that truth and justice could rise from any tragedy. Carter watched the celebration from the steps of the courthouse, Marie's hand in his. They had lost friends, faced threats, and endured betrayal. But they had gained something more valuable, proof that justice wasn't just an ideal. It was something real people could create together. Tommy Mitchell ran past, leading a group of children in junior judge robes, each carrying a toy gavel. The future of justice looked bright indeed. The sun set over Silver Ridge, casting long shadows from the new buildings. In his prison cell, Cromwell watched another appeal denied, his power finally, truly broken. In her office, Anna Morales filed another story about communities fighting corruption. In the community center, Sarah Mitchell helped another town prepare its legal strategy. And in his chambers, Judge Nathaniel Carter prepared for another day of ensuring that justice served everyone, not just the powerful. The battle for truth and accountability would never really end, but Silver Ridge had shown that it was a battle worth fighting. The astronaut toy on his desk stood proud in its little robe, a constant reminder that sometimes justice required seeing things from a higher perspective. Around its base, the Silver Ridge caught the light, shining like truth itself. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary battles. Because somewhere, right now, another Silver Ridge is waiting for its moment of truth.